What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and as promised, I am here to do my evaluation of the last 6 drafts. The reason why I'm doing 6 is because this is primarily focused around Chris Grier and his ability to draft. Real quick, I'm going to go ahead and I made up a template that I'm going to go through. I'm going to go ahead and pop it up, but there's a few things I'm going to say first. First and foremost, I want to note that as a GM, the GM's job basically is to build a roster in the image of the head coach, essentially, right? Because what you want now, obviously the head coach has a ton of say, right? Whatever, it's a collaborative effort. That's always the case. Coaches generally do have, picks that they have their fingerprint on. We've seen a number of them with Brian Flores, Hunter Long, Noah Igbenogany. There are a couple, Adam Gase had his, I think Micka was a pick of his, Brandon Doughty, whatever. A number of these guys, I think, were very Adam Gase kind of picks. Jakeem Grant, right? A lot of these guys, Laramie Tunsil. I think a lot of these guys, right? So obviously that's the case, etc. So that's the first thing is what is a GM's job, right? His job is essentially to build a roster in the image of the head coach. Number 2, the thing for me about Chris Grier is I feel like he's always the kind of person he is whoever's in charge, whoever's giving him the orders and telling him what to do is the person he, adheres to, whatever, etc. And he just follows their blueprint, to be fair to him, to the best of his ability, right? Now, when it comes to the actual picks, some of those, like, the names that I pointed out for Gase or for Flores, I think in those cases, the head coach was like, this is the guy I want. And Chris Grier was like, got it. That's the card. If the coach didn't, have a, pounding the table kind of, or, real definitive, I want this guy, then probably, Chris Grier took over and put in the card, made the selection from that point, right? I think that dynamic applies to both of these coaches, because the way Chris Grier is he just implements the blueprint that he's given to the best of his ability. Now, that can be good in some ways, and this is one of the major pieces of context that I think we need to take into account. One of the first major pieces of context is that can be good on one hand, because again, the job description is to build in the image of the head coach. It can be bad though if the GM doesn't have the ability or the balls to put his foot down and be like, no, dude, you're about to make a bad pick. And which I think has been the case in a lot of cases over the past few years. Because Brian Flores wants a guy, and we've seen, picks like Noah who have been reaches, et cetera, right? Or, misprioritizing those kinds of things. As you guys know, to be clear, to be fair, I actually overall really liked the draft classes from 2016 to 2018 when Adam Gase was, chirping in Chris Grier's ear. Now, to be fair, and to a little bit of added context, obviously the first 3 years that we're going to look at here from 16 to 18, right? And then obviously I have 19 to 21. It was Tannenbaum was still involved, but it was, Gase who was, the image was being built in Gase's image, and the team was being built in Gase's image, and he had a lot of say in the personnel and the decisions there. The back 3 has been Brian Flores, and he's obviously been the GM, the actual GM at that point, in full control, right? Whereas the first 3 years, he was a major role. He pretty much, it's like the draft game plan, right? Like he basically ran the game plan for the draft. Obviously those other guys were heavily involved. But then, he was the lead in the scouting department for those first 3 years. So just a little bit of added context, but these are the drafts that Chris Grier has run. Okay. So, now, there's a couple different perspectives to look at when you're evaluating these draft picks. Okay, so obviously and that's why when you look at these, when you look at the draft picks, I actually have 2 columns here, okay? And the first column is to the Dolphins, right? For the Dolphins. Now, there's actually even a different, an added layer to that. There's a bit more nuance because there's, their contribution to the Dolphins, like some of these players, like Laramie Tunsil, for example, right? There's the contribution to the Dolphins while they were here, right? And then, so, and that alone could get a grade, which is what I gave it here. And then, but obviously in the here and now, the Dolphins are getting absolutely no contribution from the player, Laramie Tunsil. We're not talking about the draft capital that was accrued in trading him away. I'm just strictly talking about the production. So obviously from a production standpoint, Laramie Tunsil is not giving us anything. But what I did here is there are 2 columns. The first column here is the contribution to the Dolphins. The second column is taking into account the player that they are after having left the Dolphins. Are they still in the league? I looked, I went through to see if these players are still in the league. I looked at their stats and all of that stuff. I took all of that into account when I did the grades for, the player that they currently are. Are they in the league? Are they contributing to their team? And and what level are they contributing? I also took into account what round they were taken in, etc., etc. So all of that is important to note. So let's start to, go through this a little bit, and hopefully one more bit of information here, because I got totals for the drafts, right? Now the total, there are no like A minus, B pluses, like there's no pluses and minuses here. What I did is because I tried to be, I tried to be as unbiased as I possibly could. And then I obviously wanted to try and get, a total grade for the draft. So, a cumulative of across all of these, because part of success is, can you hit on at least, like 50% of your drafts, blah, 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 how many starters can you get? How many Pro Bowlers? Those are all factors that go into it, right? So what I did here is I graded them, and then each letter grade had a number, right? So if it was an F, it was 1. If it was an A, it's 5. And then what I did was I added them all up. I took the average, and then yes, I did round because I'm not doing, pluses and minuses. So I rounded up or down based off of the principles of rounding, right? And that's how I came out with the total grades. So let's start to break this down a little bit and go through each one of these through year in and year out. So 2016, round 1, we took Laramie Tunsil. Now, obviously, as it currently stands, like I said, the Dolphins are getting no production for him. So from that standpoint, you could say that it's an F, right? Because we don't have that player anymore. We're obviously getting absolutely no contribution. But when we did have Laramie Tunsil, I would say that the only, the only reason why he doesn't have an A here is because of the fact that he's no longer with the Dolphins. So I did try my best to still be as objective as I could and take that into account with the grades when I was looking at it from the perspective of from the Dolphins. But, so in other words, in my evaluation, the kind of play that we got from Brandon Albert, or not Brandon Albert, that was the dude that was at left tackle his first season when he kicked into guard. But Laramie Tunsil, I think we got an A grade out of him. I think he was a phenomenal player for us. And as you can see, I still grade him out as an A even after having left us because I think he is that type of player. But, taking into account that he's no longer with the Dolphins, drop it to a B, just take a little bit off of that. But I think that it's a B, right? Away from the Dolphins, he's been an A. Now, round 2, we get Xavier Howard. I think in both categories, it's an easy A. He's a fucking beast. He leads the league in interceptions over the past since 2016, right? No player at his position has more, right? Whatever, right? And he's been a stud. He's been to the Pro Bowl, all pro. Like, he's phenomenal, great. We love Xavier Howard. Yes, there are the injury issues. There's been the contract disputes and stuff going on. But I'm just talking about, again, from a value perspective and what we're getting out of him as a player. And I think it's clear in a way been an A for us. And obviously he hasn't left us. So that's why, you know, I mean, he's still with us. So, you know, he hasn't left us yet. So you get it, right? That's why the grade is exactly the same. And now, if he wasn't with the Dolphins and we weren't getting production out of him anymore, I probably would have done the same thing like I did with Laremy Tunsil and dropped it down to a B, just simply because he's not here anymore and we're no longer getting production for him. But he is still an A, you know, an A plus type of player, whatever. All right, Kenyon Drake, I think round 3, especially coming from round 3, I thought he was about a C. We got roughly that, you know, kind of level of production. Now, it was a little disappointing because he was a round 3, but he had decent production for us. But look, Kenyon Drake was always going to be just, in a lot of ways, if I'm keeping it honest, a lot of ways, like Myles Gaskin, is a very situational and role player, a you know, change of pace kind of back, you know, a back to maybe use a little bit out of the backfield, that kind of guy, right? Now, obviously, Myles Gaskin was taken in a later round, so for the round value, he has a better value, but I thought overall with his time for the Dolphins, we got about a C out of him. Overall, though, I do think that he is a B player, even having been out, you know, even when he's been outside of the Dolphins, he is still in the league. He has had some decent production. He has bounced around a little bit, but he has had some decent production for the teams that he has been with. He's also been battling some injuries and stuff like that too, more recently, so it is what it is, but I gave him a B overall in that category from that perspective, right? That after having left the Dolphins. But for the Dolphins, I give him a C. Leonte Carroo in round 3, we didn't get shit out of him. That's a fail pick for the Dolphins. I think overall, he is still in the league. It's not really saying much. That's the only reason why I bumped him up to a D. From that perspective, is just simply because he is still in the league, I believe, and he is bouncing around. But really, you know, and he had some, he had some decent production for us. Actually, matter of fact, though, I'm going to go ahead and change that, actually. Because early on when we did have, I mean, he was like a 4th wide receiver, but for taken in the 3rd round, he actually had some decent production for us. It's not going to change. It's not going to change the overall grade. I already know that, but I am going to bump him up to just a D for the Dolphins. I mean, again, there wasn't really much there, and you know, he still hasn't. We got the most production. Let me just say that we got the most production out of him. So really, I guess if you want, I probably should actually flip-flop that and put F for his time away from the Dolphins, because he actually has done less since he's been with us. So an F since then, and he actually might be out of the league. I think when I was going through, it looked like he was still with the team, but he might be out of the league at this point. But anyway, so D when he was with us, F after the fact. Now, Jakeem Grant, especially for being around 6. Now, I know he had some fumbling issues. He wasn't great as a wide receiver, but he did give us overall some pretty phenomenal production in the return game, and he did give us some, you know, at times, at moments, he had some flashes in the receiving game. Now, again, Jakeem Grant was always going to be, when it came to that perspective, you know, maybe like a 5th guy or whatever, and he was going to be used in very specific roles, like on sweeps, like, you know, right, jet sweeps kind of things, or, you know, you got to get him in a quick slant where you can get him out into space and let him, you know, use that speed, whatever. But I think that overall we got B production out of him, and particularly and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that because of his issues as a wide receiver and stuff. So I'll even go in as far as to say and admit that and as you guys already should know, I actually really like Jakeem Grant. I was a fan of his coming out, especially in the 6th round. But that's, again, that's taken into account, especially for the 6th round and where we got him. I thought he's a B. And I think he still remains that as a player in this league. Jordan Lucas We didn't get shit out of him. He's not in the league anymore, I don't think. And if he is, he's not doing anything. Brandon Doughty, fail. Thomas Duarte, fail. So for the 2016 class, it averages out to be a C for the contribution for the Dolphins, as well as a C for, the after the fact. Are they still in the league? Are they contributing to any team, etc., right? So, okay draft. Now, just real quick, though, when you just go through this, I mean, just on its face, so Laramie Tunsil's a stud, generational, or, he's a Pro Bowl at least left tackle. Xavier Howard, stud. Kenyon Drake, decent. Leonte Crew, blah. Jakeem Grant, again, for his draft status, I think you get a good solid B, and then, fail. So, decent overall draft C's across the board. Now, 2017, Charles Harris, he was a complete fail for the Dolphins while he was here. Even when we did have him, right, for the 2 or 3 years that we had him, I think it was 3 years, he didn't do anything for us. He's actually done a lot better since he's left, though, and that's why he has a C after having left the Dolphins, because he's done significantly better. This year for the Lions, if I'm not mistaken, he has 6 sacks. Last year, for whoever the hell it was he was with, I can't remember off the top of my head, but he had like 3.5 sacks. And that was like a half sack more than he had with his entire year with the Dolphins, right? So he actually has done better. Now, he can't get more than a C grade, though, because he was a first-round pick, and he still has a long way to go into living up to that. So, C was about as good as I could give him for his, draft grade as a player, period, right? So to be a little bit more clear, the second grade is just looking at the player, right? Because even though he doesn't have any contributions to the Dolphins anymore, and we're not currently getting, so his grade for current contribution is an F. His grade for contribution when he was with the Dolphins, because he's no longer here, and then when he was with the Dolphins is also an F because we didn't get shit out of him. His grade as a player, though, after having left the Dolphins, considering he is still in the league and, with another team and contributing, is a C. Rayquan Mcmillan, the reason why I gave him a D for the Dolphins is because early on, he did show some promise before, obviously, the injury that really, sapped him of some of his ability, his speed and stuff like that. But even in, 2019, before we got rid of him, he was pretty much our entire run defense, right? He lost a lot of his sideline-to-sideline ability after the ACL injury, but he still was a very good run defender. And now, having said that, though, we still didn't get a ton out of him. So that's why I give him a D for the time that he was with the Dolphins. And after that, he still only gets a D at best, just simply because, he has still been battling injuries. He's bounced around a little bit. I think he's currently on the IR for New England, if I'm not mistaken. So he can't really get a very high grade there. So I gave him a D for his contribution to the Dolphins during his tenure and a D afterward. Cordrea Tankersley, he's he's interesting because super early on in his career for the Dolphins, in his first year as a rookie, he actually showed some promise, but then as we know, he got hurt. He was never the same. We ended up getting rid of him. So overall, he gets an F for the Dolphins. D, though, the reason why I gave him a D for after the fact or whatever is because he is still in the league, and I believe he's either on, I think, the practice squad or maybe even the injured reserve for the Vikings, if I'm not mistaken. But that's as best as I could give him for after the fact. Isaac Asiata, he has at this point retired, but he's a fail for us. We didn't get anything for him. He's been a fail since then. Devon Godshaw, especially for a 5th round pick, I thought we got really good production from him. I actually really liked him as a piece, a foundational piece to on that defensive line. Obviously, he's not here anymore, and so that's why he dropped a letter grade from the after the fact grade, because I actually thought we got really good for a 5th round pick. right? For a 5th round pick. Is he, is he a world beater and is he gonna fucking, get a ton of sacks and stuff? No, but he was a 5th round pick, and for the round that he was taken in, I think he gives you really good production, and he gets an A for that value overall, right? And for New England, he actually has been pretty damn good on that defensive front for them. So for the Dolphins, I think he gets a B. After the fact, I think he's, as a player, I think he gets an A, especially from where he was taken. Vincent Taylor, I thought he was a C, especially for being a 6th round pick. I thought his contribution for the Dolphins was a C. After the fact, still a C. Isaiah Ford, C's across the board. I mean, he's kind of whatever. But it's as high as a C because of a 7th round pick, right? So again, all of that stuff is taken into account. Overall, though, for the draft grades, I give, for the Dolphins contribution, they get a D. And for the overall, just evaluating the players as they currently stand today, regardless of whether they're contributing to the Dolphins, they get a C. So for the first 2 drafts, you get a C. That's about 50%, hitting on about 50% of your players, and even getting superstars like Laramie Tunsil and Xavier Howard, right? And then some, quality starters in there as well, like a Devon Godshaw and I think a Kenyon Drake and Jakeem Grant for his very specific roles, right? Anyway, but then you move on to 2018, and the 2018 draft class, in my opinion, was one of the better ones because you start off with Micka Fitzpatrick. Now, he gets a grade as a C for the Dolphins because he actually did have a really good, a pretty solid rookie season for us. Obviously, we didn't keep him much longer after that because he left the very next season in the trade. So, it drops his grade pretty significantly for the Dolphins, unfortunately, because, as a player, I do think he is an A-graded player overall. And obviously, he is an all-pro safety, and he's played really well overall for the Steelers. Excuse me. So for the Dolphins, Micka Fitzpatrick to me gets a C in regard to his contribution there, but he is an A player. Mike Gesicki, I've always liked Mike Gesicki. I actually really liked the vision that they had for the Mike Gesicki-Durham Smythe tandem, but for the Dolphins contribution, I give him an A. I like him. I've always liked him. And look, I get there's the argument about him not being a pass blocker and stuff, but I counter that with, if you just knew how to build your team properly, and if you actually had an offensive line that was at least average, if not, better. I mean, obviously we want an elite top 5 offensive line if we can get that, but I would love that. But I also would just be okay with a middle of the pack top 15 offensive line as opposed to, a 32nd ranked offensive line. And if you had that, then you would be able to, because to me, Mike Gesicki, without having that blocking ability, et cetera, and as just a special receiving weapon in the passing game at tight end, I think he is a luxury, but he's a luxury we shouldn't have to fucking discard because we suck at putting a fucking offensive line in front of the quarterback, right? Anyway, but I think he's an A for the Dolphins and his contribution. And I think, obviously he hasn't left, so he's still with the Dolphins, still an A. Jerome Baker, I think he's a B, a solid B across the board. Durham Smythe, again, especially since he was taken in round 4, I think he gets an A across the board. Kalen Ballage, we didn't really get shit out of him, so an F for Dolphins contribution. He, has bounced around a little bit and has had some okay contribution for us and for, other teams. So I think overall he gets a slight bump to a D. And because, again, now Kalen Ballage, much like Myles Gaskin and who's the other one? Kenyon Drake, I think that they are kind of role players. What I mean by that in his case, though, whereas the other two are more complementary backs and backs that you would have like receiving the ball out of the backfield, I think Kalen Ballage is really the kind of guy that you want for like short yardage and goal line, very specific kind of running back. And so overall, and early on, he showed a little bit of flashes there. He actually even showed some big playability early on with his career, as a Dolphin. And, you know, he has kind of stuck around the league, bounced around a little bit. Overall, he gets a slight bump up to a D, but obviously not very strong. Cornell Armstrong, F's across the board. Quentin Poling, F's across the board. And I know Jason Sanders has had some issues this year. I think, you know, there's a number of reasons for that. I think coaching has part to do with it. I think it's probably partly mental. I think there are a number of issues for it, but I think overall he still gets a solid A as of right now. If the issues continue, though, for example, then it will start to drop his grade down to a B. Obviously, again, all of these evaluations are ongoing, unless, of course, some of these guys are just not in the league anymore, and then, you know, their evaluations are done, because then there's nothing left to continue the evaluation on. But Jason Sanders, I think, overall gets a solid A. So total for Dolphins contribution, the 2018 draft, to me, is a C, and after the fact is a slight bump up to a B. Now, for the 2019 draft class, let's take a look at that. So Christian Wilkins, to me, now look, he's definitely, let me be clear, he's definitely having the best season of his career. He's even producing more in the pass rush aspect of it. But I do want to continue to see more consistency. He has raised himself up to because to me, one of the issues that I had originally with Christian Wilkins is, one, to me it was misprioritizing, in large part because there was a big run on defensive linemen in the first round of the draft, and so they didn't get to take one of the blue chip players at that position. They kind of like settled for him, you know, in a sense, when there was still blue chip offensive linemen on the board, for example, right? So, and then obviously, like, by the way, you know, I could have included round 2 Josh Rosen, and in some of my, you know, breakdowns of this draft class, I do include Josh Rosen. I didn't here because I was just looking from the perspective of the players that they chose. But there is, you know, some argument to be given that, you know, our second round pick, we don't have it, and that was a complete fail because it was Josh Rosen, etc. Again, I'm not doing that here in this evaluation. I'm just looking at these players. But anyway, going back to Christian Wilkins, I think that he has made a case, though, to say that he is a solid early second round pick. And if he does continue this consistency and continue to play on this level and can stay healthy and do so and all of that stuff, then I think that he does have an opportunity to eventually move up to an A and, you know, become an overall A-graded player, because I think he was a bit of a reach for round 1. I don't think he should have been taken, and he was taken, what, I think 18th overall or something like that. I don't think that he should have been taken there. So for me, he's a B. Obviously, he's still with the Dolphins, so there's no grading him after the fact. And at this point, with the 2019 draft, that's pretty much going to be the case. I mean, like, Isaiah Prince and Chandler Cox are no longer with the team, but they're not contributing to any team, so they remain Fs. But the rest of these draft classes, the grades for Dolphins contribution and after the fact contribution are basically going to be the same. Also in large part because, you know, with the 2021 class, for example, they're still rookies, and all of these guys are on rookie contracts, and they're, you know, ongoing evaluations. But to me, Christian Wilkins is solid B across the board. I give Dieter an F, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, how could you give Dieter an F? Because to this point, he hasn't done shit for us. In year 1, he was complete fucking trash. It took him till, you know, first of all, over the past 3 years, they've moved him around a ton, right? So he's never really even settled into a position. Finally, this year, in year 3, he settles into center, but then gets hurt. Hasn't really contributed. He's been okay at best. And of course, as we know, a lot of the issues with the offensive line are being masked by Tua. So it's not like, you know, this offensive line is particularly great and, you know, whatever. So Dieter, at this point, to me, with his contribution to the team, it's an F. He hasn't done anything for us. And in his very limited snap count as a center, he was just okay at best. and that's even being generous. So I know people are going to hate that, but it is what it is. I give Andrew Van Ginkel, though, a good solid B. I mean, you know, drafted in round 5. The reason why I can't give Andrew Van Ginkel an A, though, is because to me, he's still too limited of a player. He really only excels when he's, you know, rushing the passer. Honestly, Jerome Baker is pretty much that same way. And frankly, if I wanted to, and I could drop his grade to a B or to a C because of that. But the reason why I leave Jerome Baker as a B is because he does tend to lead the team in tackles. He does have good sideline to sideline speed, and he's not great in coverage, but he at least can catch up and, you know, so on and so forth. But when they use him appropriately as an off the ball blitzing linebacker, he's fucking great at it. Right? Anyway, and Andrew Van Ginkel is the same way. So I give him also a solid B, especially because he was drafted in round 5. I think draft status gives Andrew Van Ginkel more of an opportunity to have an A grade than Jerome Baker, and that could eventually actually play out as things develop if he does get more consistent with his overall game, and then if he continues to be productive in that role. Anyway, Isaiah Prince, fail across the board. He's no longer with the team, hasn't done anything since. Same thing with Chandler Cox. Myles Gaskin is a B across the board, which actually quick little bit of update and, you know, Dolphins, you know, here and now news, he was actually just put on the COVID list. He could return for the Jets game, but you know, we'll have to wait and see how the protocols and process plays out. But he actually just got put on the COVID list. So, but he definitely gets, he's really struggled this year. Obviously, that has a lot to do with the offensive line, the play calling, et cetera, all of that stuff. But for a round 7, he gets a B, right? So for the total, it C's across the board. Now again, I mean, most of these players haven't left, and the players that have left, we never got, you know, contribution from them. They haven't contributed since, so that, you know, the grades remain the same. So C grades for across the board for the 2019 draft. Now let's look at 2020. Oh shit, I forgot to do. Oh, no, it's just way down here and I can't see it. Okay, it's way down here. I did not forget it. Anyway, 2020, let's take a look at it. Now, Tua, this grade could change significantly if, and I know a lot of, you know, Dolphins fans out there, the Tua haters are going to disagree with this grade, but I don't give a shit about them. This grade could change significantly, and there was just reports out yesterday that the Dolphins are going to make another run at Deshaun Watson, which I actually fully expect in the offseason, no matter how good Tua does. But this grade could change significantly when it comes to Dolphins production if after this year they do end up getting rid of him, they give up on him and bring in Deshaun Watson. Because even though I think he has performed exceptionally over the first 17 games that he's played, you know, it is over the course in real time of 2 years. There has been the injury stuff, and you know, he's a first round pick, and if they give up on him, that'll significantly. So in other words, if he ends up leaving the Dolphins after this season, my updated grade would likely be a C because of all of the things that I just mentioned. So it would probably downgrade to about a C if I'm keeping it honest. But I think especially considering the fact, now I could be fair, you know, and considering all of the things, and this is a super heated and debated topic, but I think that, you know, because a lot of people are going to be like, oh, but he's missed a bunch of games due to injury. How can you, even for his Dolphins contribution, even over the 17 games that he's played, even though he has great stats and all of this, that, and the other, how can you give him an A? Because the vast majority of the team failure and even some of the injury stuff, I think, is directly a cause of the coaching staff and the issues around him, right? Because the coaching staff, the injuries, the reason why I say injuries is because, you know, even the injuries he sustained this season and last season were because of the terrible offensive line. But this coaching staff was perfectly okay with that. They had no issue with putting trash in front of him, right? They had no issue with putting him in last year when he wasn't ready. Whether it be because of his adjustment to the NFL or learning the playbook or because of his health coming off that hip injury. A lot of that has not been his fault. And for the context that he has had to operate within, I think he has done a phenomenal job. And I do think that if and when he does leave the Dolphins, he is going to be a phenomenal player and a franchise quarterback for somebody, even if it's not us. And of course, also too, this is, part of that is the here and now. It's an ongoing thing, ongoing evaluation, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, Tua gets an A across the board. As of right now, Austin Jackson gets straight Fs. Noah gets straight Fs. Robert Hunt to me is a B. He was taken in the second round. He's the only offensive lineman that I say you really have as a building block. So, and even though he's had some struggles this year, I think it's more derivative of the shit that's around him, et cetera, et cetera. Rayquan Davis, I think, has been an A. Brandon Jones has been a B. Solomon Kinley has been a D to this point. Jason Strourbridge, an F, obviously is no longer with the team. Curtis Weaver, obviously an F too, not with the team, but neither of these guys have really contributed yet to this point for other teams. Now, again, some of these grades could change as time goes on, even the guys that have, left the Dolphins because their evaluations continue. And they are still in rookie contracts. They're still young players that can be developed, etc. But for now, these guys get Fs. Blake Ferguson, a B. Honestly, I feel like it really probably should be a C, though, because they could have got him in, and you know what? Fuck it. I'm actually even going to drop it to a C. I've convinced myself in the here and now because... yes, he's a 6th-round pick, but they could have got him as an undrafted free agent, and there were so many other holes to take, so many other holes on the field that, misprioritizing. I know I said that I'm just pretty much grading the players here, but he's a fucking long snapper, and yes, he's on the team, but they've also brought in a number of guys over the past couple years, too, to compete with him, and, Tabor Pepper and Rex Sunuhara and whatever, right? So, C, and also, too... C. I'm just going to leave it as C. It's not going to change the overall grade. Obviously, it's the average. But, and then Malcolm Perry is an F. I guess he had a couple nice plays in his early tenure with the Dolphins, but really nothing special. Obviously a 7th-round pick, but he's no longer with the team. And actually, too, New England cut him, and I don't think he's been picked up by anybody. So, anyway, he gets an F in my book. C's across the board, though, for the 2021 class, or the 2020 class. Now, let's take a look at the 2021 class, because as of right now, again, all of these guys are in their rookie season, so the top 3 guys could be great now and they could all suck later, and these back 4 guys could suck now and be great later, right? All of that could happen, or these top 3 guys could be great now and be great for the rest of their careers, and these guys suck now and suck for the rest of their careers. So there's a lot of ways this can turn out. Obviously, these are really incompletes, and this is a very here and now grade for these guys. But Jalen Waddle, I do give him an A, even though, again, for me, I do think that it was a bit of a prioritization. I think that there were greater needs, especially with the way that they loaded up at the wide receiver position, right? Bringing in Will Fuller, having Albert Wilson come back, having, Kirk Merritt and Isaiah Ford and Jakeem Grant and all these other guys on the back end. That's after Devontae Parker and, Matt Collins and all these other guys, right? So... but I do think with the production that we're getting and the type of player that he is an A player. Jalen Phillips, I think he's got an A. Javon Holland, an A. Eichenberg, an F. Hunter Long, an F. Larnell Coleman and Garrett Dokes, all Fs as of here and now. Now, again, to be clear, a lot of these can change. When it comes to the overall grades, the draft class gets a C. So, whew, that's a lot, and this is a long video. I know there was a lot said there. There's a lot of nuance. This is how I am. This is the way it is. But I think to get accurate evaluations, you have to have the big picture in mind, and you have to look at it from all of these different perspectives, and you have to keep it all in context. So, hopefully I was able to do that here. Like I said, it was a lot, but when you take a look at it and you look at Chris Grier as a GM over the course of his time as a Dolphin and as the head guy running the show, so over the past 6 years, again, just to kind of summarize and to wrap it up, there are some, key parts of context there. He pretty much does, just does whatever the guy in charge tells him to. So for the first few seasons, that was primarily Adam Gase with some Tannenbaum in there. For the, the most recent seasons, the Brian Flores that's been, Brian Flores with, I guess, some Marvin Allen and Reggie McKenzie input sprinkled in as well. But Chris Grier is not the type of GM to fucking, if he doesn't, agree with a pick, he's going to put his foot down, veto it, and make a better decision or make a different decision at the very least. He's not that kind of guy. He's never going to be that kind of guy. And to me, that can be ultimately a detriment. You do have to build the team in the image of the head coach, and the head coach has to have a lot of input, of course. But he does have to have at least the ability to do the other part, and Chris Grier doesn't have that to me, and one of the primary reasons why I don't think he's going to be the answer for the long term, because he will allow bad picks to be made because he doesn't have the balls to speak up and say no, right? So that is important context, and then of course there is the important context of, who he was taking that information from and taking those blueprints and those demands from, whatever. And again, in the first few years, it was Adam Gase, Mike Tannenbaum. And this past few years, it's been Brian Flores with a little bit of Marvin Allen and Reggie McKenzie. But when you look at the overall grades, he's actually done a solid job, generally speaking, because when you go through all of my grades, he's got about a C average, and that's hitting on about half of your picks. And when you include guys like Laramie Tunsil, Xavier Howard, Micka Fitzpatrick, you have all pro players in there. Okay, now again, this is a very nuanced conversation, and part of the conversation is Chris Grier going to be the long-term answer? I don't think so, but he has done a solid job overall with his picks, and he even has, picked some superstars and very serviceable players, starters, right? Like some decent depth options, right? Like he's done a pretty good job overall. Jalen Waddle and Javon Holland and Jalen Phillips and the most recent draft. But he has also had some very bad picks, complete fails, like, in the recent draft picks, the second half of this draft class, or Noah and Austin Jackson, or, a number of the guys early on, like a Quentin Poling or Cornell Armstrong, or, any of these guys, Isaac Asiata, right? Any of those guys. So he's kind of been hit or miss, and it's really just him following the blueprint of whoever's in charge, or following the orders. Let me say that, following the orders of whoever's in charge. And so that is a major flaw to me, and why, and part of the reason why I don't think he's going to be a good GM, or why I don't think he's the answer for the long term here for the Miami Dolphins. But again, he actually has had a pretty solid overall performance, I think, objectively, when you actually look at the players, both from a perspective of contribution to the Dolphins, as well as, contribution after the fact for any of these players who have left the Dolphins and have gone to other teams. All right, this was a very long video. There was a lot to talk about, a lot to sift through, a lot to say, a lot of nuance. So I am going to wrap it up here. It's been a 45-minute video. Sorry for the length, but again, it was a pretty major topic, a pretty, in-depth discussion. So I did want to get to it, and I did promise the video. So, but before I get out of here, let me make sure to remind you about the Rave On Sports App, the new fan-driven sports app for all your sports, basketball, baseball, football, college, whatever you like. And they are looking to enhance your game day experience with live play-by-play coverage, live chats with other fans and content creators like myself. Look for the links to that in the description box. And with that, I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comments section. And of course, as always, follow me on Twitter at DillonTartaro and on Instagram at Dolphins_with_Dillon. And with that, I'm out. Fins up.